Hello folks, this is episode 3 of RocketPod and part 2 of CRM Implementation. This is the podcast for businesses or charity professionals looking to expand their CRM knowledge. A CRM newbie or a seasoned pro, wherever you are in your CRM journey, RocketPod can help you beef up your knowledge so that you can succeed in the fast-paced, data-driven world that we live in. So in this episode, we'll pick up where we left off in episode 2, which was all about discussing how to nail a CRM implementation, which included identifying what you need, setting project aims, building your CRM team, mapping out your processes, and planning for data migration. In steps 6 to 10, we continue by looking at system integration, selecting a solution and or partner, defining project scope with your partner, making a user adoption plan, testing, and a bonus step 11.
So we've talked about data migration. The next thing is step 6, something called system integration. So what does that mean? So if we want to possibly link the CRM system or synchronize the CRM system with some other system in order to push data backwards and forwards and to provide value and to provide insight to the users of either of those systems. So this is called system integration. So we would advise our client to, at this stage of their preparation plan, because that's what we're doing now, a lot of this is just for people to think about, and is to think about system integration and think about, okay, do I want to link my CRM, let's say, with my accounting software? So, do I want to link CRM with Sage or with Xero or something like that? Do I want to be able to link it with Microsoft Outlook, for example? So the emails can come into CRM or to SharePoint, so I can link documents, things like this. So it's definitely just worth having a think about where you might want to put those links between this CRM system and other systems. And this is something that's becoming more and more of a thing now than it ever used to be. So in order to create that sort of what they call a one source of truth system, but often case it's the CRM as the hub in a wheel. If you think of a wheel with a CRM in the hub, and then you've got these spokes going out to all these other different systems, you end up with CRM being like that single source of truth. Does that make sense, Natalie?
Yeah, that does. It does, and as it's something that's been mentioned, and it's something that's known out in the marketing world about the benefits of having that single source of truth when you're talking about data, and then using that data and leveraging the data for better marketing and communications. Yeah, for sure.
Some of the integrations are a lot easier to implement than others. So, for example, if you were to use Microsoft Dynamics, it already comes with these built-in native integrations between Microsoft Outlook, between Microsoft Word, Excel, SharePoint. So all of that, we just need to basically turn it on, more or less. There's a very little bit of configuration, but not a lot. So some are easier than others. Those are pre-built in with Microsoft Dynamics. But others, let's say, for example, if you want to integrate your CRM with your accounting software, we would just have a think about what's the best way to do that, because there's often various ways to do that, right, Carl?
Yeah, it's a number of different ways to create integrations, and it often depends on what you're trying to achieve. We would always look at what's the most cost-effective way to do it, because licensing might play a role, as well as the experience for the user, depending on, again, this comes back to when you've mapped your processes out, what you're kind of looking for, where are the touch points between the systems. So, for example, if it's with a finance system or an accounting system, do you need to send the data over when you've won an opportunity or created an order or created an invoice? Do we need to send that over to the finance system, or are we just bringing data back in from the finance system when they've paid? Things like some high level information like balances, that kind of thing, outstanding amounts. Those kind of things are the questions you have to think about around it. And they can be in integration is a little bit like data migration, that it can be quite a complex, chunky area of a project. For most people, when they're first implementing CRM, they will just look at the simple integrations that Ian mentioned, sort of with Outlook, rather than looking at anything more complex. And often that's the easiest way to start building out your CRM first. Get your processes locked down in your CRM system first, that you're comfortable with them, and then look at the integration as sort of like a phase 1B or quick phase 2 once you're comfortable with everything that's in the system.
Yeah, that's often the approach that a lot of companies or clients will take when they're implementing CRM. So the integrations, those more nice to have integrations, will come as a second part. get the CRM in first, get the minimal viable product in there, get it working well, and then start enhancing it by putting in integrations. So, you might want to integrate with a customer service desk, for example, or an accounting system or a marketing system, operational database or whatever. And sometimes these integrations can be done with tools that are available, such as Microsoft Power Automate and other tools. Another option is to use a third-party tool as well. So there are some pre-built for certain applications. I know some of the accounting packages have there's pre-built third-party applications that can integrate between Dynamics, for example, or CRM, and these other accounting packages. So we always work with the client to try and explore the best way to do that.
One of the important things to think about with integration is when you're thinking about what's the scope of it, how big do you want it, how much integration do you need? What you don't want to do is recreate the wheel. You don't want to build a finance system inside of your CRM system. You don't necessarily want to build a CRM system in your finance system. So what's the minimum amount of functionality or information you need to send across between the two systems to make that process overall easier and provide whoever needs the various bits of information to them in the relevant place? You don't want to recreate each system in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot more we could go into on system integration, but I just don't want us to get too technical, I think, today. But so I think for this step, it's more just a question of having a think about what do you want to integrate with, and then us as experts, we can help you to suggest ways in which we can set those up. So if I've gone through all these steps so far now, I've thought about all that stuff, and so far I haven't chosen what CRM package I want, because I can do all that without knowing what CRM I want, right? I can say, look, this is my CRM team. This is the area that I want some CRM to exist in. These are the processes and my goals, and I've got data here, and I want to bring that in, and I want to integrate with this system. So far, I don't need to have chosen a CRM package, but at some point, I'm going to have to do that. So if I think about, okay, I want to select a platform or an application to work with, what are some of the things I need to think about when I'm selecting a platform?
It needs to be fit for purpose. Just a few tick box, a few things that you probably need to go through. It needs to be fit for purpose. Yeah. Is it going to be cost effective when you look at licensing? Is it well established with a good pedigree? With software, you can often find new software spun up pretty quickly, but then there's always a danger, especially with a hosted service. If they go out of business, what happens to your data?
You talked about licenses. Is that a big expense? Is CRM expensive?
Depends on your functionality. Unfortunately, there's no straightforward answer until you have an understanding of what you're trying to achieve with the CRM. So they can be cheap. They can be more expensive. Again, the same sort of question, whether you're a charity or not. Some providers will provide charity or not-for-profit licensing, which could be significantly cheaper than the normal or the standard pricing.
Yeah, I know Microsoft do, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
So, that's true, actually. Yeah, so again, this is another area where an expert can help, right? Because if I want Microsoft Dynamics, for example, I could select this license or this one over here. This one over here is £100 per user per month, and this one over here is £7, let's say, for example, per user per month. How do I know which one I need? I guess that's where
that's where the partner comes in. Yeah, that's where the partner comes in. So when we would, for example, if we engage with you, part of that process of us understanding your processes is also identifying what kinds of licenses we think you're going to need to use the functionality within the product. A good partner will be able to make your license cost as efficient as possible.
That's an interesting point you raised there, guys, because certainly with some of the kind of out of the box or also known as off the shelf CRMs, the licensing structure is completely different and actually is a little bit limiting in that you're either buying something that isn't quite fit for purpose and doesn't have all of the features that you need, or you jump up to the next kind of level and then you're overwhelmed and you got all these features that you don't necessarily need. So what you're saying is that you can actually support clients in being efficient with those licenses and not paying more than they need to necessarily.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we tend to do is as a rough example, if you have a process that perhaps straddles two different license types, but a small change might save you X amount of pounds per year per user on a small change to your process might save you a bit of money on the licenses. We would always advise you that these are your options. You can keep the process as you currently do, or potentially we could look at tweaking it slightly so you fall within the confines of one of the licenses rather than say two or that kind of thing. And that generally would make it as efficient as possible.
So I think I interrupted you. So if we backtrack a little bit, you were going through a kind of like a little tick list people should check off, against their CRM platform. I think you said something about being well established with a good pedigree.
Yeah, it needs to be well established. I think you need to think of how long have they been around? Where are they? Where is my data, etc. That's one of the we spoke about that briefly on a previous episode. You also think about how people are going to consume that system. So what I mean by that is, are we using it on laptops? Are we using it on desktops? Are we using it on tablets? Are we using it on phones? Are we out in the field? Do we have good signal? Do I need offline access? All these kinds of things need to be thought of while you're selecting a solution.
So these are all questions to ask, I guess.
Yeah. Most people tend to use things like Outlook, Excel, Word, Microsoft Teams is very popular, especially since the pandemic, and SharePoint. Do we have integrations with those things? That's always a good question to ask. What's their roadmap like? This is a key one to understand whether they're still investing in the product. What's the roadmap like for their future development? Is it freely available for you to look at if you want to see how much development is actually going into the product? That's an important one. That often gives you an indicator as to whether a product's dying, whether it's growing. Is how much investment's going into it.
This is really sound advice because it's not something that people would necessarily consider. What you've just said, it wouldn't pop into the average person's mind to even think about kind of that investment in development. So
absolutely, and even think it's also not necessarily about what you want right now. So at the moment, you might have decided we don't need any integrations, but potentially in a year, 2 years, your business might have grown to a point that you might need it. So what does that look like? Do we have the ability in the future to integrate this system with something else? It's always worth a thought.
Okay.
Security is another good one to think about. So how do you want to define, this often comes out of that process definitions stage. Who needs to see what within the system? How secure is the data? And I don't necessarily mean how secure it is from hackers or people trying a data breach, for example. How secure is it internally? If you've got sensitive information that you can't have exposed to certain users, that's a core requirement that you have to assess. How does the security work? How can I restrict Simon from seeing Jane's data because Jane's working on a special contract that can't have anyone else view what she's looking at?
So if security is an issue, you need to find something that's got a sufficiently granular security model in it, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Reporting often overlooked when people are looking for a new system, but not just from when I say reporting. I mean, reporting is a very broad topic, but can we configure our own dashboards within the system to show us data that we want, or do we have to pay a partner to do that every single time? Something to think about. Because if you need to pay someone to build a report every time you need something, over time, that's additional cost that you might not have factored in. So
it's unnecessary time as well, isn't it? You just want to be able to, a few clicks and there you have all of the information at your fingertips.
Yeah. A lot of organizations are used to the comfort blanket of using Excel. So do you have the ability to export data to Excel? Is a good one to ask.
So this is becoming quite a long criteria list, isn't it, guys? So sometimes... Would you sometimes advise clients to have kind of primary or critical features or must have, and then kind of like a nice to have? Because obviously it depends on their budget, doesn't it? At the end of the day, they might want all the bells and whistles, but when it comes down to unlocking the funds from the accountant or the director, it's a different matter, isn't it? So kind of looking at what they'd really, really, really like, and then what's feasible and what's reasonable.
Yeah. You can grade them in those requirements in any way you need to. I mean, a common way is to grade them as must have, should have, or could have. But you can do them as 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, 15, however works for you, ABC. It's just a way of grading what is your primary requirement, what is the most important requirement versus something that would be nice to have versus something that should have.
Yeah,
I think we've got our requirement sheets on our blog area, which we'll pop a link into the bottom of this description for people to check out. It might be helpful.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So, I mean, the next question, if you're looking at platforms, and partners as this step 7. It's step 7, select a platform and possibly a partner to work with. Do you need to work with a partner? So I guess the question is it necessary to work with a partner? Can I do it on my own? In a lot of cases, yeah, it's like, I want a new bathroom and a shower putting in. Can I do it on my own? Yeah, I guess you can do it on your own if you know how to do it, but you may end up in a mess. It's always good to have the experts in. But if you're a startup, for example, the very start of your CRM journey, and there's literally you, one other maybe, and you just want to track a very simple sales process, then maybe you don't need a partner. Maybe you can pick something off the shelf for the first year or so until you start to grow. But at some stage, you're probably going to need someone to help you, because you're going to grow and you're going to be needing to benefit by adding new functional areas into that CRM system. You might want to be bringing other systems into play as your company grows. So it's definitely worth exploring that, because at the end of the day, a CRM partner is an expert in CRM. I've been working with CRM since 1999, I think it was, a long, long time ago. And Carl, very similarly as well. So to get that kind of expertise is really going to help you as you go through your CRM journey. Okay, and so moving on to then, so we've done 7 steps. If we look at step number 8, define the scope of the project with your partner and create a project plan. So a scope is actually what's included. So what are we going to cover off in this project? So in step 2, you define the goals for the CRM project, i.e. what do you want to achieve in terms of actual outcomes. The project scope is defining what work do we need to do in order to achieve all those goals. So what work is involved. And then the plan, project planning, project management, it boils down to one thing: who does what by when. That's the golden rule of project management: who does what by when. So it's basically putting a plan together saying who's going to be doing this task, when are they going to do it, and you put that down as a schedule. Sometimes you've seen a Gantt chart or something like that. That way everybody knows what's going on. But if we go back to the scope for a minute, let's say, for example, we said we want there to be 30% less clicks to onboard a new customer, or we want our telesales team, for example, to be making 20% more calls in a day. How do we determine how to do that? The best way for that to happen is when you've teamed up with your CRM partner. Your CRM partner will be able to see your current processes. Remember, way back in an earlier step, we mapped out those processes. So this is where your CRM partner can look at those processes with you. You can talk through them. You'd have already had some form of measurement. If not, we can do some measuring now so that the standard is benchmarked. And then we will know if we've made an improvement, if we've actually hit those targets or those goals, for example. So your CRM specialist or the expert will be able to extract what it is that you want to do, and they'll be able to design a route that will get you to that system. Sometimes we'll do something called a fit gap analysis. Now, that sounds a bit techie. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what a fit gap is, Kyle?
Effectively, what it is looking at what the potential solution does out the box and what you're asking it to do, and working out what the difference is. So what can it do? What could it do with basic configuration? Or what is it that we're asking it to do that's so different to what it currently does that we have to perhaps write code or do something slightly more complex to implement it? The benefit of doing something like that is it just highlights to you what, and you would do this in conjunction with a partner, just to be clear, because the partner would be the one that would provide you with the knowledge of the product. It provides you with the understanding of how far away your processes are from mapping into that system. You can use it as a comparison tool between systems to find a system that would potentially suit you more or fits your requirements more. But if you've already chosen a solution, it gives you an indication as to the amount of effort it's going to need or be needed to implement something.
Okay. One of the things that we sometimes do for clients, because they're not 100% sure, they want to make sure that we've captured their requirements, that we understand what it is that they want to achieve. So one of the things we do sometimes is to create what's called a proof of concept system. Now, this is quite common, actually. And a proof of concept system is like a very, very cut down version of something that we might be proposing to build. So we might, let's say, for example, somebody wants a system where they will create customer service cases, and they want to create goals, and they want to create outcomes, and they want to capture attendances at workshops and things like this. A proof of concept system, we might charge a couple of days, 2 or 3 days to create a very simple basic system. It would have things like customer service cases. It would have a couple of tables for goals and possibly outcomes, but it wouldn't have the full functionality, and it wouldn't have all the fields and columns that will exist in the final product. But it's just enough of a system just to give you an idea that we've understood what you've asked for, and we can show you, yes, this can work. And in the fully finished system, this will connect to this and this will connect to that. If you ever hear a proof of concept system or POC, what did you explain that? Just so if you ever hear it, you know what it is. It's a very simple cut down version just to give people an idea or an understanding of what could be in the final system.
We use it as a way of providing confidence to the end client so that they're happy and they're confident that we've understood what it is they're looking for. Because we could write a 200-page document, present it to people, but 9 times out of 10, people don't read it or don't understand it.
Yeah, it's easier to see it,
don't want to
isn't
understand it. It's much easier to visualize.
Or don't have time to read it.
Don't have time. Yeah, there's a variety of different reasons why. But the idea is that by showing them a proof of concept, which is essentially a cut down version of any documentation and things like that, it allows them to visualize it straight away. They can ideally start seeing their processes being mapped in there because we've captured those processes and we're demonstrating to them that we've understood the process and we're driving them through it and how it's going to look inside of CRM. It also works as a little bit of a mini training exercise as they get further down the process of the project. The key users that are viewing that,
it helps them to become familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It helps them to become
Terminology.
familiar. Exactly. So then this other thing that we sometimes, or very often actually, create is called an MVP, a minimal viable product. So what's the difference between a minimal viable product and a POC or proof of concept?
Well, a minimal viable product is something that's working. It's a working solution that is provided to people so that they can actually get on and work with it on day one. A proof of concept is just to provide evidence that we've understood the requirement and that they can see their processes working in the system or potentially working in the system, but it's not necessarily a solution that you can start working on day one.
Yeah.
It's just an example.
Exactly. So the minimal viable product is something that you can actually use for real, live, but it has more functionality than a proof of concept. A proof of concept is just, as Carl said, just so to give them confidence so that they understand that we've understood their requirements. The minimal viable product, MVP, is us building a CRM system for you with the minimal amount you need in order to be providing benefit to you and to start using it. When we do this, it's often for customers who don't have a lot of budget up front, but they do want to have a system and they're quite happy to engage on maybe a longer term. So they'll start with an MVP, a minimal viable product, which gives them just enough to get them up and running. So maybe it's logging customer service cases, or maybe it's just creating opportunities, sales opportunities, for example, for their current customers, and then maybe putting suppliers in there as well. So some very basic stuff. And then over a period of time, working with us or on a recurring basis to slowly add more and more functionality to that, rather than taking the whole requirement in one big hit and then building out a much larger application that covers maybe 2 or 3 different functional areas. It's quite a lot of testing and quite a lot of design involved in it. So it often works really, really well, actually, because one of the benefits of having an MVP is you've got something up and running really, really quickly. So it's quite an agile approach, really. You can get your CRM system sometimes even a few days, a couple of weeks, and actually people using the system as well. Another advantage to it is that because it's smaller than a full featured system, it requires less learning.
What I would say about the POC and the MVP, probably more the POC, is kind of as like it's a really critical kind of checkpoint for everyone in the organization, because suddenly it goes from being conversations and ideas and collating information and endless meetings between various people to actually being something that's tangible, which when it comes to engaging teams and individuals and that onboarding and that user buy-in, this is an exciting phase of the project, I would imagine. And I would imagine when you're working with clients, they can't wait to see what it's like, see how it's going to work, see how it's going to feel. And like you say, giving confidence to them that you've got a hold of this really well and you're delivering something that's going to be fit for purpose.
Which brings us on to step number 9 in our 10-step process, making a user adoption plan. When Carl and I used to work together in another company, I used to work as our project manager, and change management and user adoption was really something that I was quite passionate about, and still am actually. And when we started Rocket CRM, that was something that was very, very fundamental to everything that we want to do. We want to make sure that we design systems that are designed for users. And back in the day, it was often that CRM projects tended to be IT-led projects. So what I mean by that was it would be the IT department engaging with the CRM partner because it was an IT system. This was way before the maturity that organizations have now around these kind of things, and they tend to be business-led. But in those days, they were IT-led, and IT departments would dictate what the requirements were, no thought or consultation to the users. And of course, then it would often end up in something that wasn't really accepted by users, never really used it much, and there was a lot of CRM failure. So it might be badly planned because they hadn't consulted the users. So we would always say involve users from the beginning, bringing them on board, getting their feedback, and then it's all about making CRM simple, because that's what we do. That's our tagline. That's how we got our reputation. And we will have later on another episode just on user adoption. So we're not going to dwell on user adoption too long, but there's a lot of strategies you can use. Do you want to just mention one or two things, Carl, about user adoption?
Yeah, the key one is involve the users from the beginning. I mean, we've this is sort of reiterating what we've already said. Bring them on board, get their feedback, make them feel valued, make them feel that their opinion is valued. That's often one of the gripes we get from previously failed implementations, is that they've not felt valued. That's
a really good point, actually. Yeah. It's like I mentioned earlier about the person who has that little known process that only that user knows about. Yeah, and it hasn't been thought about, hasn't been considered. And now they've got to bend over backwards to try and make that work. And that one person can cause a lot of problems as well. You shouldn't underestimate the word sabotage in CRM projects as well. It can certainly happen if people are not happy.
It feels like through all this conversation, the reoccurring theme is people. Obviously, processes too, really important, but people, it's about the people, isn't it? And their roles in the organisation and building a system around the people. I think maybe people can get hung up on the technology a little bit too much and be overwhelmed by the processes. But when you really look at the crux of it, it's having a system that works for your organisation, your people.
It's that classic Venn diagram, where you've got the circles, you've got people, process and technology, 3 different circles, and where they intersect, that's your CRM. But it's sometimes it's almost more about people than process, than technology. But yeah, people, as you say quite rightly, the resounding thing is people. On a daily basis, we're dealing with the people, we're working with people on the CRM project, and it's the people that are using the CRM system for the benefit of other people. So yeah, it's really, really important. So this brings us to our last, or there is a step 11 possibly, but our last step of our 10-step Rolls Royce preparation guide. So this is not the actual implementation, it's kind of like preparation, is to be guided by the partner always, but always be available to test everything. Before you go live, make sure that everything is tested. So there's various ways that can happen. It could be more formally structured or it could be more ad hoc, but the actual testing of a system before it goes live is super important. Do you want to mention anything about that, Carl?
Yeah, I mean, there's different forms it can take, but obviously user acceptance testing is the most common one. Sometimes it's known as end user or beta testing. It needs to be tested fully. Generally, with having a proper test plan, the ideal would be to test whilst the solution is being built. And then the UAT testing or user acceptance testing is done towards the end of it once you've got a working system. The idea is to break it or find the gaps.
So I get a bunch of users. I need to get a bunch of users in a room. So they need to take time out of their normal daily job, right? And spend a couple of hours.
Don't underestimate the effort needed to test. It's often what people think who have not experienced a CRM rollout, they underestimate the time that's needed for users to test the amount of effort that needs to happen. Sometimes they think once they've done the discovery sessions and the workshops and things like that, it's over. They don't need to do anything until live. It's not. It's constant all the way through, testing everything. What you don't want to do or what you're trying to avoid is a situation where you go live and you find that actually there's a really core process that nobody's mapped out.
Yeah, something's been forgotten. So it's finding those gaps, isn't it? As you say, de-risking it. So making sure that there's no gaps before the go live. You've tested absolutely every possible thing that you need to test. So every process is going to be in the CRM has been tested.
I've got a question for you on that. So how would you, if you want to be 100% sure that you're not missing any gaps, what would you create? What would you do to help make that process easier for the testers?
Sounds like an exam question. I might create is like a testing plan or a script. I might say, look, let's take that process map that we did earlier, in Microsoft Visio or whatever we did. And from there, I might take a step-by-step plan and say, okay, look, this is what we would expect. So first step in this process is to do this. Click here, and then you should see this. And then I will then add these fields in and press this button, and this should happen. And then this is what we call a testing script. It's very, very time consuming to create. And in most cases, this never happens. But in very large organizations, it almost always does, because there's a lot of people with a lot of time on their hands. As we all know, in the SMB sector, people don't have that kind of time in their hands. But it's important to at least try and take those process maps and be thorough with those when you're testing, and trying to make sure you're testing the process thoroughly every step of the way, rather than just saying, oh yeah, that bit works, we think that works, or something like that. It's really important to just be really, really thorough with it. Did I answer your question correctly, or did you thinking of something else?
No, that was what I was thinking of. The other thing to do, or a good tip, is to actually have migrated data. We talked about data migration and trial migration, is have your migrated data in the system when UAT is being done. And the reason for that is because then the users are actually cross-checking data at the same time as they're reviewing processes, both of which have equal importance. And
they're doing the testing with what appears to be real data, customers' names that they recognize, right? So UAT might not find absolutely everything. Even with the best will in the world, loads of UAT, we keep saying UAT, remember it's user acceptance testing, basically just putting people in front of it and getting them to try and test their processes and break it. But with the best will in the world and all the UAT, there's going to be something that gets missed. So, it's really important to ensure you've got adequate provision to fix any issues as quickly as possible during that first little crucial 2 or 3 weeks of the go live. So if you've got a partner, make sure they're aware of your go live, make sure there's support people on hand so that anything that comes up can be jumped on straight away, because those first few weeks are so important for user adoption. So that's our 10-step plan. Let me just very quickly sum up again. So the first step in our Rolls Royce preparation for your CRM implementation was to identify your functional areas or your processes that you want to cover. The second step was to then work out what are the aims or the goals. Remember, SMART goals for those areas. Then have a look at who are the team internally that are going to build that CRM and work with you on realizing that project. And then the next step is to take that team and work with that team of subject matter experts and map out those processes, visually draw them out so we can see all the different steps. Who owns which step, what happens, where does it go next, etc. Think about after that, for step 5, we're going to look at data migration. So where, as Carl said, is the most important thing is think about where does all your data exist? Where is it? And then we can work with a partner or on your own, try to clean that data so it's ready to move into the CRM system. Step 6, think about all the different systems you want to integrate your CRM system with. So there's some simple ones, Word, Outlook, Excel, for example, but you may have some other ambitions that you want to link the CRM system with as well. So it's certainly worth thinking. You don't have to do anything about it. Just think about those, and they may not be phase 1. They may not be in the MVP or the minimal viable product. They may come as part of the next stage, the evolution of your CRM. Step 7, select a platform or an application and select a partner. So I think we've established it's pretty much, if you're going to really want success, select a partner and a platform and you'll be on your way to success. Step 8, define the scope with the partner and create a project plan with the partner. So actually we've got a real life project plan with dates. We know who's doing what and by when, and you'll be guided through the whole thing with your partner. Step 9 was to, and this is more of an internal thing than the partner's area responsibility. This is more an internal thing for the client, is to make your user adoption plan. What are the things that you're going to do that are going to ensure that your users will use the system? And step 10, test. Remember that user acceptance testing before you do anything, before you sign anything off, before you go live. Make sure that you test to make sure everything works exactly as you want it to. And we have kind of got an 11th step. Do you want to mention about that, Carl?
Ongoing development?
Yeah, ongoing development.
Don't think it's the end, because it's not. It's the beginning.
It's right. Yeah, it used to be that we got CRM now. That's it, right?
That was the old. Yeah, we won't do anything for another 5 years. It will stay the same as it is for 5 years, and then there'll be a big push to invest in a new CRM, make changes to support whatever's happened in those 5 years. Yeah. It doesn't work that way anymore. New features are released very frequently. Your processes inside the business change, constantly evolve. And you've got to be keeping on top of all that and making sure that they're all modeled inside of CRM. Plus, if you've started with an MVP, there's other departments that will have functionality that you could look to bring in as part of that goal to try and centralize everything. Generally, we provide things like a managed service contract. So essentially what that does, it provides ongoing time for you to use for various different things like consulting, report writing, configuration, training. You can look at for things like the types of things that we kind of do ourselves and what we think you should look for: high quality customer support, defined SLAs, regular check-ins. So what I mean by SLAs is if certain cases meet certain criteria, how long do you have to wait for it to be responded to? How long do you have to wait for things to be resolved? So regular check-ins, having regular communication with the partner rather than just communication when something goes wrong. It's the wrong type of communication you can have. The proactive communication, getting the partner to understand where you are, suggesting improvements for you based on what they know of how you're using the system, monitoring and reporting on dynamics and usage, understanding licensing, discussing with you changes in licensing that might benefit you in terms of cost if things have changed or new features and functionality that have come out. Regular security audits, delivering training, obviously we've talked about as well, whether that's a new starter training, whether that's new functionality that you want to roll out, being able to roll out training specifically to those, and liaising on your behalf with Microsoft and any other third parties where their products are in your solution. Wow. That's what a good partner would provide.
Gosh, we've covered so much stuff.
You guys do a lot, don't you? You really do. That is a meaty framework.
That's been a meaty couple of episodes. That's a lot of stuff that we've talked about. I think anybody listening to all this and taking notes could now probably do a degree level course on preparing for CRM. As we said right at the beginning, is you don't have to do all these things, but the more you do, the more prepared you're going to be at the end of the day.
What I'd say, certainly from the client side, which I have been previously, it feels like, as I said at the beginning, a CRM project can be incredibly daunting and full of tech and jargon and a whole new world. And it just seems like a no-brainer that you would go down the route where you've got that expertise at your side, holding your hand. And my God, I'd leave my hand holding and my brow, the sweat from my brow dabbing away, because it's when you really get into the nuts and bolts of one of these projects, although you know what the goal is and it's absolutely worth it, having that expertise and someone there who can explain these things, take away that jargon, just makes the whole experience much calmer, controlled, enjoyable, because you guys, you're hilarious anyway. But what I'm saying is that it seems like a no-brainer for SMEs who are serious about getting a really good CRM, whether that's simple functionality or more complex, that they would look at a partner and probably manage service with that as well.
I think often what it is, as you said, it's daunting, right? They're at A, they need to go to B, but B's up a massive hill that they have to climb, and they don't know how to get there because they can't see a road. So it's providing a roadmap. How are they going to get there? And giving the client confidence that you understand what they're trying to do, you've done it before, and you're going to get them there. That's often what I find.
Cool. Yeah, definitely. Thanks, definitely. Guys. Well, so we'll catch up with each other on the next episode, I guess.
I think we will. I think that's a wrap. That concludes episode 3 and the topic of CRM implementation. You won't go far wrong with your CRM project if you follow this 10-step framework. And remember, not all businesses follow every step religiously. Some are more applicable to businesses than others. For more sound advice, subscribe and do tune in to our future episodes. This has been the RocketPod podcast, delivered by Rocket CRM, the place for spot-on CRM advice delivered in a simple-to-understand format, as Rocket CRM makes CRM simple. The show was produced by the team at Rocket CRM and Thumbs Up Marketing, with special thanks to Alex Tilbrook, Design and Illustration, and MD Hammond. For information on Rocket CRM, visit rocketcrm.co.uk, and you can also follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn. Twitter's @RocketCRM UK and LinkedIn @Rocket-CRM. Thanks for listening.